before we get into the contents of the video, I would like to say thank you, because I did promise this is my 1,500 subscriber special, and this is one of the controversies within the series that I really wanted to go over at some point, give its own video for a moment in Fairy Tail that's very controversial but misunderstood. And I don't think a lot of people, they give it the criticism that they think it's deserved, actually understand the context of what was going on. And I usually don't try and throw shots at people, but I still blame King of Lightning for this whole thing. A lot of people, I don't think, actually paid attention to the entirety of Sting's character and understood why he surrendered. That's why you have this dude talking about it was all like, oh, Sting's a pussy, it's a bunch of plot bullshit, it makes sense. It makes complete sense, you just weren't paying attention. And that's the thing of things. And I don't think that Fairy Tail is some undamaged series that has, you know, nothing in it. Like, I'll do a feature rant on Laxus's fucking Red Lightning. That'll be a video in of itself one day. But this is one that I think is completely justified in why I think it was actually very well handled, and why this is a logical conclusion to what was happening. And just kind of like looking into certain aspects, like, let's just look at Sting in general. All right, Sting and Rogue were hyped up to be like apparently powerful enough that they killed their dragons when they were kids, but also strong enough to kill Acnologia. That's the Acnologia comment. I never believed, because even from the start, I never believed it, because Acnologia was so much beyond even like the likes of Hades, and Hades was already like far beyond like Wizard Saint level. Well, I'd put him up there at least with like the Four Gods of Ishbal. It just is something that, like, a claim that doesn't seem standing for Sting and Rogue, especially like these two young characters. But then we got the information like, oh, that they killed their dragons, which just doesn't seem to fit right, because when they killed their dragons, it was 14 years prior in the series when they were killed. They're strong enough to kill dragons when they were like 5 or 6 years old. Again, that just doesn't seem likely. But then we got further information before, like, even like certain reveals. Like, we knew that Sabertooth was only strong on top because of Ichiya was never serious. Ichiya is very powerful. Like, he was someone who could compete with Ursa, but we know like his weakness is it's very hard to get him to fight seriously because he's generally very goofy. Kagura never went all out. Jura just straight up never competed, and we know that Jura is much stronger than Minerva at the time, and Minerva was stronger than Sting and Rogue, so it's like, you put Jura in there and he would have been fine, because he one-shot Orga, so it's like, you put him in there and he probably would have one-shot Sting and Rogue. Like, it's just, it was always a silly notion to me, like, that people didn't find the clues that Sting and Rogue's power, like, claim was false. But also, just the fact that it all made sense to Sting's character, because, well, what did we know about Sting going into everything? What about it was, Sting has a character. Let me get some of these panels brought up. Sting, when he came in, he was this kind of very cocky dude. He was kind of like seemingly like douchebag Natsu, but he wasn't evil. He still cared about, Lecter. Lecter was the thing about it. Like, we know, like, the Dragon Slayers and their Exceed are very close. Like, a lot of people, for some reason, always wrote it off as, like, oh, like, dude, his cat died, and, all that, you went all dramatic for. But the Exceed, I think, like, I made a good comment towards, like, there was a conversation with, like, a One Piece dude who was, like, who tried to do that, and it's like, well, any of the Exceed are as much of a cat as Chopper is just a reindeer. And it's like, no, they're intelligent, sentient beings that have their own personality, and these characters have been with them for years. They've been with them for large chunks of their lives. They're as close to them as a lot of their other friends. And the Exceed especially are just closer because of, how much they spend time with each other. It's like, you have a pet that you're already close enough already that I bet a lot of people listening to this video would value their pet above, like, normal people. But now imagine if your pet was also, like, able to talk and, walk around and just do normal stuff. Like, you got a companion instead. I guess it'd be like, kind of like, what, like I almost said Ash and Pikachu, but it's like, well, Pikachu didn't talk, but he was intelligent. But anyway, with Sting, though, you have to think about, like, what was the motivation for his character? What was the origins about him? And, like, I think it all just, like, became very clear why he surrendered if you look at those. So, when Sting, the very first time that we saw him, like, really fight, the first chapter that, when he and Rogue fought Natsu and Gajeel, when, after they used their white and shadow drives and they failed, and they're getting ready to use Dragon Force, the first thing that really like Sting thinks about while he's losing and has to get serious is this panel where he's talking to Lecter. And we find out later that it was because when he and Lecter were very young, he made a promise to him, essentially because Sting was a big fanboy of Natsu. Like, Natsu was a much older Dragon Slayer. He was both famous and infamous. He's always getting into trouble, but he was always, a character of interest that people would talk about. And it's not just like, you could be a person and read, like, these, the Weekly Sorcerer and find out things about, the Salamander Natsu. And you could be like, man, that guy's pretty cool. Like, Jason was always one, he just thought he was really cool. He really liked a lot of the members of Fairy Tail, especially, obviously, the ones that were most fun to write about. But with Sting, it was much more personal because he was a Dragon Slayer he could look up to, and he's a big fanboy of him. But Sting ended up, with Lecter being somebody that became a fanboy of his. Like, he was the first person to kind of have that same affections towards Sting that Sting had towards Natsu. So, that's got to mean a lot to him. That's crazy to think about because, it's such a simplistic thing for a base kind of like aspect of a character, but it's, again, very logical because you understand like the feeling of how you feel towards like an idol, and now you have this guy feeling that towards you. And he made this vow with Lecter when people were calling Lecter a liar about like how powerful he said Sting was. He's like, I'll prove them all wrong. There's this guy named Natsu. He's really famous. I'll beat him in front of everyone, so people know you're not lying. And that promise like carried over a long time. Like when he knew he had to get serious against Natsu and Godzilla, and they were going Dragon Force, he thought about his promise with Lecter. When he thought he won, as you see in this panel here, he thought about, fulfilling his promise to Lecter. When he actually lost, he thought like he's apologizing to Lecter because that promise meant a lot to him. That was his motivation becoming very powerful. It was the first person to really believe in him, and it's not only that, like he's been with him his whole life, and he's always had this notion of being able to fulfill that. Plus, it became even heavier on him when they found out that the members of Fairy Tail were alive that they thought were gone. Because also keep that in mind for him when he's a kid. Like, he had this promise, and this idol that he wanted to defeat and prove himself in front of. And he ends up, like, at least from what they knew, they thought he died. So for 7 years, like, I imagine, like, he was completely devastated over it, but, like, that opportunity re-arose. Like, he was actually really excited. I didn't get that panel, like, prepared, but, like, remember when he saw Natsu, like, charge into the Sabertooth building that they had in Crocus, like, he was, like, it looked like he was, like, about to, like, get a boner for how excited he was. Like, Natsu's so strong, this is gonna be awesome, I'm gonna be able to defeat him. But, while looking at all that, it's like, he genuinely just really wanted to not only, like, prove himself in front of everyone, for everyone to see, like, how strong he was, he cared a lot about his image. I think that's one of the reasons, like, why Sabertooth was so flashy. They were always, like, they clearly cared a lot about, like, how they appeared, because not only were they about making an entrance, they also, like, Sting's moves in general were very flashy. Like, look at a lot of his attacks. They're very, like, big, bright. They put on a show. They're just all around, like, hey, look at me attacks. The Sabertooth's always changing their fashion design. Like, almost every single time they're off panel for more than 10 minutes, they end up coming into the whole new outfit. But for Sting, obviously he cared about his image, but it wasn't just, oh yeah, I want everyone to see who I am, see how powerful I was. It was, I want everyone to see how powerful I was so I can fulfill this promise to Lecter. Because he cared so much about being able to end up completing that pretty much oath that he had against him. It was huge to him. It ended up like the driving force of pretty much everything that he based his whole goal and like his reason to get powerful and to do all these things was. And even like afterwards, Natsu wasn't even in the final day of the Grand Magic Games, but he still was looking for a way to show it because he's like, all the other members of the Fairy Tail Guild that were competing were all beaten up. They were barely able to stand. And Sting, who was at like 100%, like he was just charging, ready to go. Logically, he should be able to take them all out pretty easily. Though personally, I always felt like if they just ended up taking all their magic and putting it into Laxus would be able to beat him even while, severely damaged. Like, the amount of magic he'd probably be able to conjure up would be enough to take out Sting, probably in one, like, big hit. Like, just drop Roaring Thunder on him again and then take him out. But we'll never know. But this was a very, like, again, important thing to him, because he still, overall, not just defeating Natsu, it was about fulfilling that image that he wanted. He wanted to make sure that no one could call Lecter a liar. He wanted to make sure that the first person that ever believed in him could look into that and say, like, he did it, like what he promised he would do for me ended up, fulfilling. And that was, again, very vital to him. Like, he was devastated when Lecter died, and you saw like Rogue go protect Frosh. The Exceed, they're like almost like an extension to him. Like, again, like that's a lot of your pet feels like a lot of the time, but like the Exceed are like a mix between a pet and a friend. Like, they're very intelligent, like maybe except for Frosh, but you can hold a conversation with them. They are like having another person. They aren't just cats. They're little animal people. And it's always been silly to me that people kind of like ride on like, oh, it's just a cat, but it's like, no, it's not. Like, you're looking over like the Exceed are an intelligent race, but also, like, clearly, as we've seen throughout the series, Dragon Slayers are very close to their Exceed. And, well, actually, if you want to look at it, like, Cobra is the closest, but his is not an Exceed with his companion. I just thought that was really funny, because he and his are going to bone, but I suppose that Kiana and, God, I always forget if it's Kiana or Kanina, the fact that Cubelius turned out to be a girl that went and joined the Fairy Tail Guild and then came back to reunite with Cobra. Anyway, not important to this, but with that, like, when Sting surrendered, I'll focus back up to this original image, like this big shot that we had, is Sting, when he dropped down, it wasn't just, you guys win, I give up, I don't want to fight you guys anymore. No, that's not why he did it. When he saw everyone, he saw like these characters who were completely beaten to hell against all odds. They came from a guild that until recently were a laughingstock because they were always getting clowned on. They were always getting humiliated. They were at the top and then just kept dropping down. Everyone kept surpassing them, and they were, clearly like abused over it. But even with that, they were fully fine standing in the face of, what looked at least to be certain defeat. That's when he commented about, how they looked, their unwavering kind of like conviction, and nothing about him that he was doing ended up like winning them like over as like, oh no, he's gonna win, let's just give up. They were gonna fight until the very last moment. And clearly that appearance that they gave off, that just strong, powerful conviction, was what Sting was what he was going for. That's one of the things he wanted, because he wanted to be ended up presenting himself in front of a crowd, because we know that he knows, because like how big the Grand Magic Games were. This wasn't his first one, and he finally had the chance to prove himself in front of the people that were perfect to finally like cement, like in his mind, Sabertooth's spot as #1, because Fairy Tail was the #1 guild at the time, and all these people only surpassed him because the guild was gone after the events of Sirius Island. And from all this, you look at some of this and you see like he's talking about like, even when he's still like, oh, I need to do it, I need to defeat them, I need to save Lecter. He's talking about like how his feelings for Lecter made him stronger. Like, clearly, even in all these different events, winning, losing, trying to make a decision, Lecter was on his mind, and that was like the driving force for what he wanted to do. And when he finally ended up surrendering, it was because of this feelings towards Lecter. Like, he talks about it. What he wanted was to be this impressive figure of strength, power, just all around flair, appearance, and just to be this idol that other people could look up to, while at the same time, like I said, fulfilling the promise he made to the first person that really looked up to him and believed in him. And beating up 5 characters that were barely standing, beaten to hell, while Sting like pretty much sat off on the sideline and waited until the last moments of the Grand Magic Games, until it came down to him and them. He didn't want to be that guy, because that's like a cheap win. You aren't going for the display. You're going for just like how you could sneak out a victory. And it's like, yeah, you could do that for a win, and it's like, yeah, that's still a win, but it's not what Sting wanted. And to him, like, if he ever, like he says, he's like, I got the feeling I'd never see him again. And it wasn't just like in his mind of like, oh, I just wouldn't get to see Lecter physically again. He says, I thought if I want to see him again for reason, I got the feeling I wouldn't. He's like, I don't get it myself. You were too bright to look at, and now I wouldn't be able to see him. It's because to him, it wouldn't be the same thing. To him, like going back after that, like getting Lecter back that way, it wouldn't be the victory he wanted. It would have completely like destroyed the entire idea of what Sting wanted. He didn't want like an easy win. He didn't want a last second little nab victory. He wanted that big flashy battle where he achieved victory by proving who he was. He would rather lose than pretty much break that entire idea that he had. And that's just something that like I've seen so many people not understand about Sting's character, because so many people just chalked it up into Sting being this like, he's just a he's just a pussy, he ended up surrendering because the Fairy Tale Guild had to win, blah blah blah. No, he potentially could have defeated them here, but again, it would have gone against every single thing that was laid out about who Sting was. Like I said, when he started the fight, as soon as he started losing, he thought about Lecter. When he started to get serious, he thought about Lecter. When he thought he was winning, he thought about Lecter. When he thought about, when he lost, he was apologizing to Lecter. And when he was trying to make a decision, it came about, again, proving that oath to Lecter. And so, like, again, anybody who made it all the way to this end of this video who understand, like, you've probably ran into this argument before, like, Sting isn't the best character in the series, but Sting is still a good character, and all this, even though it's like, damn, I wanted to see, like, a big battle with him, it makes sense of the story. It was what was laid out to who he was, and it wouldn't have really made sense to have him just be, like, getting a big battle with the Fairy Tale Guild members. And it either would have been he wins, and like I said, it's not the victory I wanted, or he somehow loses, and that would have been an actual problem, because it's like, he somehow loses to all these guys who are barely standing. How? But this was, obviously, like I said, the most logical way for him to bring the resolution. Like I said, the outlook that Hisui was told is that the last day was going to have, like, an unpredictable conclusion. That being that the person who was at 100% while fighting 5 people who were so damaged they can barely stand, had already used up so much of their magic. The guy that clearly, like, was the one that you think would win ends up not losing, but surrendering. And that already, like, opened up, like, hey, that portion of it made sense, but why did Sting do it? And again, like, you don't even have to look through the entire arc. Like, a lot of it, you have to just look at, like, the last 30 chapters, and specifically just Sting ones, and it's not hard, and it's always completely baffled me that people would rather go for saying it was an asshole bullshit, Sting's a pussy, he's a dumb character, yada yada, instead of, like, saying, oh, this is why he did it, like, understanding what made, like, his character go towards this path. So tell me in the comment section below, like, was this something that you didn't really ever think about, or are you one of those people that were like, like I said, they just kind of, like, looked the shit on this scene, but now you're like, this actually makes a lot of sense? But were you one that noticed it, like me? Like I've gone through Fairy Tale a lot. There's a lot of scenes that I think people would rather chalk up as an asshole rather than try and figure out why it makes sense or question the contents of the scene. But there are stuff that doesn't make sense. Like I said, like, I'll do a video probably after I finish, like, the most controversial scenes that in Fairy Tale that I think are misunderstood and wrongfully labeled as bad. And then I'll do the ones that I think that are bad that people overlooked. One of them, again, Laxus's Red Lightning. I'll do a long rant on that and how much I didn't like that. Just to put that in there, so eventually you guys will be like, what was wrong with that scene? Why did Rax hate the Red Lightning so much? I'll get to it eventually. But for now, like I said, comment below. I'd really appreciate if you thumbs up the video, friend the like button, subscribe button, and like I said, comment. This is a topic that I've wanted to go over for years, and I'm very happy that I was able to get out this video, because not just, like I said, I appreciate the 1,500 subs. I wanted to do something that was both, like, impactful and meaningful, both to me and then the Fairy Tale community, because, like, I do a lot of Black Clover stuff. But as much as I like Black Clover, my Fairy Tale is where my heart is, and this is one of those scenes that is always brought up as being like, well, this is why Fairy Tale's bad, but it's like, no, you just didn't get the scene. It had a lot of deeper meaning to it, but for some reason you would, again, like I said, rather go for insults rather than actually, like, think about what's going on, think about this character. Yeah, because even if you didn't pay attention to the events, you should say, why did he do it? maybe I missed something. Maybe I'll go back. Maybe I'll ask somebody else. No, a lot of people just go straight for insults. But anyway, like I said, I really appreciate the thumbs up. Subscribe for more content. Appreciate it, hitting 1,500, everybody. And I appreciate everyone for listening. Bye.